Hey everyone, Temporal here, and today we are going to have some fun. Oh, actually, let's go ahead and do a quick enable of that. We're going to have some fun today. We are looking at the meta for Overwatch 2. And I expect this to be a fun one. As you can see here, I've put up my two main predictions. And I'll back into these, don't you worry. I'm going to explain what we're looking at. But for one of these, we would have what I'm going to call a dive. Maybe we'll write that a little bit better. We would have a dive / poke hybrid. And I know my face cam is in the way. I'll move it in a second. And for this other one, I'd call this poke heavy. So I'm there. We see that. Let's go ahead and move my face cam so that you can see what we're talking about. Maybe I'll just hang out down over here for a bit. So we'd look at this, and we're going to see, hey, what are you doing here, Temporal? What is this? Hopefully you all can see. You know, we can even zoom in a little bit further so that you can. And this is what we're looking at. So we've gone for one of these. We're looking at a tank of Doomfist or Wrecking Ball. We're looking at Sojourn as one of the DPS. We're definitely looking at a flanker as the other DPS. And then we're trying to figure out supports. And supports are where I struggled the most. And here, we did go with a double flex support with a, hey, let's start with BAP and then let's reinforce that with Zen, which is great. But if it's just too squishy in the backline, Anna for that sleep dart helps out a little bit more, but doesn't provide quite as much value as Zen. And then, because we really did struggle with that backline, we looked at this and went, even though in some ways the tanks were the easiest to solve and what I started with, I did realize there was a place to actually run a poke tank instead, and Sigma does seem to be the one of those that would make the most sense, and this is specifically to give your backline something. We see over here, hey, what does this make? How does this work? We have a Sigma, would actually be looking at a Sigma Zen backline like that, well, Sigma can still get some value, and then Mercy's perhaps able to pair with Sojourn or pair with another poke hero as we run multiple poke heroes. But how did we all get here? Well, we've got a couple things to think about. And what we've got to think about is really what we already know. So when we're thinking about this, what do we know? We know Sojourn is currently believed to be overpowered, overtuned. We saw that the devs talked about that on their latest live stream, and that was definitely something that they were aware of. She was probably overtuned. We also saw that in this leak here, where everyone seemed to, almost universally, they agreed that Sojourn had left strong first impressions and is likely overtuned. And that makes sense. We're looking at a hero with one-shot headshot. We're looking at a hero that has a slow that they can use with their disruptor shot here. We're looking at, which is a grenade-like field that slows enemies down in it. She's got the 200 damage headshot, one shot that she can hit in that. And then she's got both horizontal and vertical movement on a 5-second cooldown. I don't know exactly what this hero is. A 5-second cooldown on movement sounds like it could be a dive hero. On the other hand, that could also just be Hanzo's little lunge leap. They sort of compare it to Baptiste's Exo Boost, but if you could use Baptiste's Exo Boosts to go as far horizontal as he can vertical, that would definitely be a dive hero. So this is probably some sort of dive poke hybrid type hero would be my guess, but I'm going to go ahead and just sort of let that be for now. Regardless, we know it's pretty darn powerful. It's definitely got some level of poke. It can use a railgun to 200 HP. One shot there. It's got some form of mobility. Maybe it's going to be a dive poke hybrid in the sense of, you know, Echo, where, hey, it's kind of leaning more towards that poke side, but it has some nice dive aspects. Maybe it's further in the poke category, like Farah, hard to really know, but that gives us something to think about. Okay, so that's one thing that we know here. We've got a nice thought for one of the DPS slots. This doesn't fully lock that in, though. This just tells us that this hero is good. We also know that Doomfist has been moved over to the tank role. We got to see what Doomfist's abilities were, or we didn't get to see them, but we have in our leaks what they are, and it has been confirmed on the dev live stream, so we know those leaks have something to them, at least, that he was moved to the tank slot, and that he was performing quite strongly in that tank slot. So what does he have going on here? Well, he's got extra HP as a tank. His uppercut and slam have been combined into one thing where he does them as one move. He now has this here, which could be interesting. This power block allows him to absorb damage for a short time and makes his rocket punch stronger. I don't care too much about that. I look at this and I go, hey, Doomfist is kind of like Wrecking Ball. He's maybe got a little less disruption, little less mobility if you combined his uppercut and his slam, but it sounds like they might have even made his slam cover a bigger area, be more disruptive in exchange for doing less damage. He's also got something where you can't really focus him to make him leave the same way because he activates a defensive cooldown where his attack then gets stronger if you shoot at him. I don't know if that's, hey, he has, 300 extra HP that you could go through for it, or if that's something where, like, he just absorbs infinite damage, or if it's like a Zarya bubble or what. None of us do. I am not going, oh yeah, let me go. I am not your source for breaking NDA here. We are doing meta predictions based on what's out there, what is generally, known, what has been leaked already. So we're piecing this together. But we did definitely get confirmation in the live stream from the devs that he was running pretty well. We also got confirmation that main tanks in general, as they viewed it, but especially Reinhardt, were not running particularly well. We know from how they think about things that they would like to think of Wrecking Ball more as an off-tank in the past, and we also know how Wrecking Ball disrupts historically seems similar to how Doomfist disrupts historically. So if Doomfist is doing well, Wrecking Ball is also pretty doing well. Wrecking Ball has extreme mobility. There's not going to be a Brig on the map. We know that. There may be a Brig on the map, but she won't have Bash anymore. It seems likely that he'd be doing pretty darn well. He's also the tank that is historically, we would say, fared the best without any other tank in play. He could have a D.Va on the board. He could have a Sigma on the board. He didn't really care. You could also make arguments for, hey, maybe Roadhog, hey, maybe Sigma, hey, any of the off tanks. But again, we're sort of in the off tanks plus Wrecking Ball sort of seem to be the ones that look okay, plus Doomfist. And especially Doomfist seems to look pretty well. So that's another piece of information that we have that's helping lead us to this conclusion. Orisa's been totally reworked into a choke breaker, but I don't think that's useful. Orisa's now in this place where she lost everything except Fortify, including her barrier, and it was replaced with her ability to, hey, she can use one ability to spin her javelin in front of her, eating projectiles, move a little faster. Okay, so that is going to be helpful, a shielding ability as she sort of breaks a choke. She also pushes people back when she does that. She also has a spear that she can use to do damage to people and knock them back, and if it knocks them back into a wall, it does more damage. And then she's got the ability to throw down her ultimate and do a large radius. She's immune to crowd control. She takes reduced damage. Damage builds over time. Clearly, she's a choke breaker. She's meant to be able to go, hey, let's look at this. Let's go ahead and go, maybe there's a choke right here. Maybe there's a bunch of opponents over here. She rounds the choke using her, speed plus block projectiles as she's going in ability, do all this stuff. The thing is, with what I'm sensing, I don't think that's going to be that useful. Don't get me wrong, breaking chokes is important, and it seems like she's well designed to do it, but it seems like she's well designed to do it at short ranges, and the maps in Overwatch 2 do actually, from what we've seen, from the map analysis we've looked at, do look a little bigger, a little more open, and also we're hearing that the game is slower. We're also aware that they tried to lower healing, or at least lower out of combat heal, or in combat healing. They tried to do some things like this. And if we're hearing that the game is slower, that doesn't bother me too much. There's a couple reasons that could be happening. That could be a case of, hey, it's a new meta, it's a new game, people don't know what to do, so they're playing a little more cautious. That's pretty normal in games, so that wouldn't be unusual. It could also be people are playing a more heavy poke meta, where it's sort of like, hey, nothing happens until someone gets a pick, or people are doing tiny little risks to try and get poke picks at each other. Or it could be nothing's happening, the fight's not really happening, and then it happens all at once. That could also be slow, where people are spending more time in the staging battle. What it tells me, though, is we're probably not having long, drawn-out, 30-second back-and-forth goat-style Reinhardts are swinging into each other with Zarya bubbles, with Moirabs pouring heals into them, with Annonades saving them, with Lamp saving them, with Defense Matrix saving them. We're probably not having that kind of fight that seems really active the whole way through, which makes sense if healing, or at least in-combat healing, has been lowered, and also makes sense if Brig's Bash, which is one of the better pieces of how she shuts down Dive, has been taken off the table, because that would allow Dive to more quickly go, okay, we quietly stage, battle a little for space, and then all at once take something out, and Brig isn't able to disrupt that Dive as effectively with the Bash. Dive should have a lot more space here. So that's getting us to some interesting places. We still don't have all of our pieces on the board, but we're laying things out here. We do know Sombra was super powerful, maybe not in the alpha that's out there right now, that we don't know, but at least in the Overwatch League demos that we saw of Overwatch 2, Sombra was incredibly powerful and was not actually working as a silence hero. When she hacked someone, she silenced them for all of 1 second, not for what she does now. She just increased her damage against them more when she hacked them, which still works well for her. In fact, she was quite powerful, but that does mean highly ability-based heroes like Doomfist, like Wrecking Ball, who used to not like Sombra so much, aren't going to be nearly as bothered by her. So that's something to keep in mind there as well. There was also the Bastion rework. I don't really think that factors in that much to meta-shaping stuff. So I kind of just told you guys where I would expect this to go. Based on the changes we've seen in Mass, hey, we're getting reports of the game slowed down. We're getting reports of supports not having a particularly good time. We're getting reports of main tanks, especially Reinhardt, feeling weak. We, in theory, believe that they've decreased the amount of healing received, at least in combat. Okay, all this together tells me that we're probably looking at, like I said, either a dive meta where people are taking a lot of time to stage to set up, not a ton of back and forth, let's fight in the open type stuff, or we're having a poke meta where it feels like nothing's happening, feels like nothing is happening, and then maybe someone gets a pick, and maybe it feels a little more like nothing is happening for a bit even after that, and we've certainly seen those in sniper metas. So that would suggest to us that, okay, those would follow the reports and also sort of make sense when Brig is, at least as a anti-diver to some degree, been lessened off the board. We have less in combat healing. That makes sense to us. Maybe a poke meta doesn't make the most sense in the world with less one-shots on the board, but I'm actually not surprised that in a game with less healing, less ability to just pump people back up to full very quickly when they take damage that they shouldn't, that the game feels like it's slowed down. So I look at that and I go, okay, if we're looking at either a divey type meta or a poke meta or some hybrid, those are probably the case. And we know that Sojourn is getting reports of being really strong. We don't quite know if Sojourn is a poke dive hybrid or like a full poke hero or what, but poke dive hybrids have pretty much always been strong in Overwatch. Yes, they got overpowered by Brawl and Goats. Yes, they've been overpowered by some double shield type stuff, but it doesn't matter too much. So we look at this, that would historically be strong, and we think to ourselves, hey, in a divey type playstyle, we would be looking at Doomfist, who we're hearing is strong, or Wrecking Ball, who should play similar to Doomfist, has the history of being independent, and now doesn't have to worry about that silence. Wrecking Ball does not need D.Va to protect them, does not need Sigma to protect them, does not need a Zarya bubble, and has the proven track record of being able to just sort of work, is also going to be very good at changing lanes, can very quickly get across the map from one place to the other, which is going to be more important when there's less people on the board. Is also going to be very effective at taking out supports when, hey, there's less likely to be a Brig that can, well, I mean, a Brig period in their backline, but a D.Va sitting in the backline, a Sigma sitting in the backline, a Roadhog sitting in the backline, no Cassidy Flash, no May freezes except during Blizzard. Wrecking Ball should have a good time in a reduced CC world, more so than a lot of other things, or Doomfist could do very similar. So this makes sense to me. And then we knew Sombra was very powerful. They totally could have balanced her down by now. We don't know that. This all could get thrown out the window by them doing extra balance patches on Alpha, heavy balance swings, by them switching things coming into the beta. But what we know here is Sombra, at least the last time we saw her, was incredibly powerful. And they've said that they're going to knock her down, and they probably will. But even if she gets knocked down hard, Tracer should still work well in this, because this ranges somewhere between like if we look at Wrecking Ball plus Sojourn plus Tracer, because let's pretend Sombra gets nerfed hard, that would still put us in a range that's somewhere between Tracer Echo Ball or Tracer Ash Ball, depending on how Sojourn exactly is designed. And that's a pretty good comp. I mean, we've seen Tracer, Zen, ball comps using Ashe, Echo, or Sombra for more than a year now, and they've been quite good, quite strong for most of it, and that should be pretty solid. So that would sort of make sense. That's not too wild. But then things get harder, because then we get to, but what do you do for your support line? Let's actually go ahead and pull up our heroes here. So we talked through tanks. We can look through our tanks. We can look at this and say, hey, why don't tanks make sense? If we look at why some of the tanks don't make sense, Winston isn't going to have resources invested in him, so he will probably be in better shape than Reinhardt, but even with his new range poke, I just don't think he's going to be as solid as the Doomfist, who we're hearing is good. The Wrecking Ball was the history of working independently. He's still going to want resources. He does have the benefit of, hey, he can block sleep darts. He can put his bubble down to maybe not get discorded. That could be really big, but I don't quite think he's going to do it. Roadhog could be good on ladder, maybe. Roadhog could be good as a, hey, I'm going to go around, I'm going to walk around, I'm going to yoink in one-shots. But I don't know that he's really going to have time to fully set up, fully do what he wants here. We already heard Reinhardt was bad. I talked about Orisa, how, hey, good, strong choke breaker. Okay, but are you going to get to those chokes in the first place? And it sounds like she wants to brawl, and I'm not really convinced that we're looking at, a big, strong choke breaker like that as a brawler. I'm not really convinced that's what we're looking for. I don't have a huge issue with Hog. I think he'll be okay. Zarya and D.Va, we've heard, are pretty okay based on the live stream from the devs. That's from the devs. They don't have the highest play level in the world. I'd be more curious, certainly, what the pros have to say, but we don't get to hear that. They're under NDA. So those two did okay, but ultimately my picks are going to be more in this territory, Doomfist territory, over here, and then I'll get to explaining why I think Sigma makes more sense than D.Va and Zarya in a second. I think Hog could be perfectly fine, but I think Hog doesn't accomplish what we need him to. And the reason for that is, if we look at these, we then covered our DPS, so let's move on to supports. And supports, when I thought about this from a dive perspective, actually gave me a little bit of trouble. I look at supports and I go, hey, how does this work? Well, if we're going to play our supports, and if we're playing this in a somewhat divey manner, if we look at the current ball comp, which is sort of where this Sojourn, Doomfister, Wrecking Ball, Sombra, or Tracer comp comes from, if we look at that, who would that comp use? What would use Zen Brig? Well, Zen Brig is just off the table, because, I'm sorry, but if Brig doesn't have Bash, she's not going to be this concrete reinforcement for the glass cannon that is Zenyatta. I think that's very unlikely. You could say, oh, but she could still do it with Inspire plus Repair Packs. Maybe, but if in combat healing is lower, I don't know about that. I'm not really buying that, to be perfectly honest. So I'm taking her off the table. That doesn't necessarily take Zen off the table, but how do you protect Zen? How do you protect your backline without a D.Va? I cannot tell you. If Wrecking Balls are coming after you, if Tracers are coming after you, if Echoes or maybe Echo equivalent to Sojourns are coming after you, how do you protect your backline if a Wrecking Ball is going on offense and Brig isn't there to do it? Well, you really can't. Like, Mercy's not going to be enough peel to keep Zen alive against even dives that don't include a D.Va, don't include a second tank like that. Like, it's just not going to be enough. And Lucio, really the same boat. Lucio's not going to be enough to fight this stuff off. Zen is just regularly going to get deleted. If you try to run Zen with any of these main supports that you would have considered it, without him also having a D.Va or a Sigma or a Hog or something in his backline. And he's not going to be able to keep up with a Sojourn, that sort of thing. He doesn't have the mobility. So that doesn't really make sense. So this could explain why we hear main support saying they feel like they're weak, because they can't do the job of protecting Zen, who would be really good in what we're looking at here. Okay, well, what can that mean for us? I don't think Mercy's enough protection. I don't think Lucio's enough protection. I don't think Brig without Bash is enough protection. So how can we pull this off? Well, we could send everyone in. We could just go a full dive comp 6-man style where everyone goes in. So these are the 3 heroes that could potentially go in for a dive. Supports gave me the most trouble to figure out for sure. And support, they could go in with them. The problem is, Lucio Mercy has historically been bad. Yes, at the beginning of Overwatch, when we had a very small support cast, that combo was the combo, but since we've had more added, they don't work terribly well together. Lucio wants to make things happen fast, generally with speed. He wants teams to go in. Mercy doesn't really want to go in herself. She'd actually prefer that a poke phase happen, but she has more ability to go in than most of the rest of the cast there just because of her mobility. So she wants a poke phase. Lucio wants to quickly make the dive happen or make the rush into the brawl happen, that sort of thing. They don't have the greatest synergy in the world, and historically, they don't have enough raw power when the fight is happening. You're not bringing a Discord orb. You're not bringing purples. Things that really help your eliminations happen, they don't quite have enough between the two of them. Moira also doesn't really bring that elimination power, so we struggle with that a little. And if in-combat healing or total healing is reduced, unless they're just massively cranked up and given her something else, she doesn't seem like she'd be bringing much other than the fact that she can go in, or if people come after her, she can potentially survive. But if she's surviving and not giving you much benefit beyond surviving, she's not going to be a priority person to take down, and you can just ignore her. So that doesn't really work either. So like Lucio Mercy actually sounds better than Lucio Moira or Mercy Moira, but ultimately I look at this and go, this doesn't seem like something great. I don't think sending all of your supports in with the dive is going to be the answer. And if that's the case, what do we do? Oh, that's not quite what I wanted. What we have to do is we have to go, okay, what else could we do if we can't peel hard enough with our main supports? Can we just accept that, hey, other things we could look at is Bap Zen has been okay. It's not the best thing in the world, but they can sort of protect themselves. They can at least duel decently. They can at least fight decently. And hey, if you're not going to get the bash anyways, this was one of the preferred support pairings towards the end of Overwatch 1 anyways. And okay, if they still have a lamp to protect themselves with, if they have Discord Orb and extreme damage, they're just going to have to rely on their ability to duel, their ability to fight people. And you might have to be dueling a 2v3, a 2v2, that sort of thing, so it's not really a duel, and people might get eliminated quick, and they might not have a ton of healing. If healing is lower in combat, the ability to take people out quickly, well, this is the strongest pair for that. Zen damage, Discord Orb, BAP damage, Lamp isn't going to care about reduced healing. These two have generally done pretty well. And then the last person who would factor in there would be Ana. I think Ana would be less good in your neutral game. She doesn't have the offensive power of these two. Her weapon play simply isn't as good, but she does have the sleep dart. So if you're in a situation where our backline is just getting wrecked too hard, Zen is the weak link, and you could potentially swap out of Zen into a BAP plus Ana, which won't be as strong offensively, as strong in the poke phase, but is going, will defang your dives a little bit, but they can protect themselves a little bit better, at least when people are good at hitting those sleep darts. So this, if we look at it, potentially gives us something where, hey, we have a dive tank, we like it, we have a poke dive hybrid maybe, we have a dive hero, and then our backline is just going to have to be, it's a little greedy by Overwatch 1 standards, but it's going to have to duel to protect itself. It's going to have to fight to protect itself. It's going to have to go, you might get one of us, you might get both of us, but we're going to trade one of you out, something along those lines, where, grr, we won't go down without a fight type of thing, as opposed to we're trying to stall. It becomes more of a, we're going to get some trade backs, as opposed to what you get in more of like a Zen Brig Diva type thing, where, yeah, you can get eliminations in your own backline, but against some comps, you're more making sure their Wrecking Ball doesn't finish something off, making sure their Tracer doesn't finish something off until she has to leave. So that could be one way that we could look at this, and that could happen. Mercedes says, rumor has it Ana is the best support in Overwatch 2 right now. And I could see some of that, some of that is going to be how they've tuned numbers, healing numbers, that sort of thing. The other piece of that could be Sleep Dart is the best way to protect yourself if Bash isn't on the table. Like, okay. That kind of makes sense. Okay, so then we move on to how did we get over to this other comp? And we got over to this other comp in a couple ways. One of which is poke exists. The other of which is it's really hard to justify these backlines. Like we talked about this, these backlines are hard, and they're definitely the weak link in these comps. No longer do you have the world where you can sit a diva in your backline and the diva goes in when your brig goes in to help stuff out. Or, hey, we have a Lucio BAP backline and it's just fine, whatever. Like, no longer do we have those because, we can't justify the Lucio if Brawl comps aren't particularly powerful. So we look at that and go, well, what can we do? And one way to fix this would be we could put a diva or a Sigma in the backline with our Zen, and then if Sojourn has enough poke aspect, which it sounds like they do, we could put Sojourn with Mercy. And then we're back to having the principle of how to actually play bunker well, was you want to have two separate bunkers. You want to have one situation where, hey, let's have our Orisa over here, our Sigma over here, and now we have the enemies in here, and maybe our Sigma has some friends with them, or Orisa has some friends with them, whatever, but we are going shooty, and however these guys try to adjust, whatever side they try to use their defensive resources against, they get pushed by the other. If they try to push into one side, the other bunker pushes into them. Well, we're not going to have two tanks. So you can't do Orisa plus Sigma. You can't do Sigma plus Roadhog, Orisa plus Roadhog, anything like that. Those are off the table. So what's the best way to get a bunker or to get a strong group that doesn't use a tank? Well, it's probably Mercy plus something. Mercy is probably the best thing for having a bunker of sorts. If that bunker has a little bit of mobility and some poke, they can potentially get away. It also makes that bunker strong, lets them take stuff where they could. It's maybe a little weird to call it a bunker when it won't have a shield, but that's sort of the best thing. So maybe it's with Sojourn, maybe it's instead with an Ashe, maybe something along those lines. Maybe it's Sojourn plus another poke hero, maybe it's double poke hero, whatever. But if you can create something where you go, hey, we can have two bunkers because we can have our... Again, we're going to look at Sigma here. And the reason I'm going to say Sigma is Zen would still be very, very powerful, especially if healing was low. Zen would be fantastic to have on your team, and that makes a lot of sense. But in the past, you've been able to try to protect him with Brig. Not really an option right now, at least I don't think so, as well as potentially Diva. And you could justify that when Diva might protect Zen and then go in, or protect Zen and then, have flexibility to do other things. But I think if we're looking at some of this poke stuff, this poke phase, we're actually going to want the Sigma who can go, hey, maybe don't protect the Zen quite as well as Diva, but can actually contribute something to this fight, to this poke phase, is actually threatening himself. Diva, when played in a low resource style, isn't that threatening to the other team. She's mostly in a let me prevent the other team from winning for a bit, but that's really a fill-in role that's like a luxury that you almost can't afford when you're the only tank in my mind. So I think Sigma and his greater, hey, yes, Zens will have to position more aggressively than they like because they'll have to position in such a way where Sigma is within range to be effective against the enemy, but they still have some level of protection here where, hey, they have Sigma can throw a barrier out, and then if a Tracer shows up on the Zen can dance through the barrier while Sigma is trying to pressure it out, or Sigma can rock the Wrecking Ball or the Doomfist that comes in, that sort of thing. That makes sense. And Mercy can even Guardian Angel her way back from the other bunker if the Zen bunker is the one that gets attacked and help them out. So that's what I can see happening. And then in the last slot, you either put a flanker, which can help you control their flankers, can help protect you a little bit, can help shoo people into your sightlines, or you put another poke, and if you have the second poke, you then have Mercy plus a poke in one slot, and you add a second poke to your bunker here. So those are the two things that I'm seeing as the most likely. And obviously, it's unlikely that this will be exactly the meta. Like I said, the meta could have maybe been this, but then it evolves. It could be a case of, hey, I don't know exactly how the numbers have been tuned. It could be a case of this would have been the strongest thing in the world, but by the time we start, a different meta will have settled and people are too invested in that and have learned that too much, and therefore when people go try exactly these things, they don't work because they're at step 1 on these things, whereas the pros who got access early, the Al pros who got access early, rather, are already on step 30 versus step 1. And yes, step 30 of this thing that isn't actually as strong is stronger than step 1 of this thing, so this thing doesn't happen. That's just how metas actually happen, actually evolve. The strongest thing in the world is not always what actually becomes the meta, because there are sunk cost fallacies, things like that, and not always fallacies, sometimes just sunk cost. goes into that. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? Does this seem wildly off base to you? Do you think that this is the way to go? I am doing this one as a stream, so I'll catch up with you guys in chat. But if you're watching this as a video in the future, absolutely leave your comments. Do you think I've picked the wrong hero? Do you think I'm missing some key bit of information that got leaked somewhere? Some opinion that someone put out there that, you know, had access to the game? You guys tell me. Just Ball because he is the only solo tank that works alone. Again, if I go back to our tanks here, I think Ball is a good choice. I think Ball is a very good choice. I think Doomfist, the new Doomfist they've told us is pretty good too. We don't know how much to trust that because it's the devs, and let's be honest, they play the game at like a silver level by and large. But I think Ball, I think Doomfist is good. I just explained why I think Sigma may have a place because Sigma lets you put Zen back in there, and again, even if you didn't put Zen back in there, but instead put BAP back in there, it is hard to protect your backlines in a game where Brig doesn't have bash. Like, we're back into dive, Brig doesn't have bash, but damage in general is much higher than it was during the first dive meta, where Brig, you know, during the original dive metas, where Brig didn't exist. So that would make keeping backlines alive very hard, especially if they've also tuned down healing. So I don't know about that one. We'll have to see. Again, I think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to play one of these heroes. I think Zarya could make sense when paired with specific heroes like Reaper. I think D.Va's mostly, unfortunately, going to end up as like a worse Sigma unless they like give her a lot more defense matrix than she currently has. And I think Roadhog will be perfectly fine for ladder. I think you could play Roadhog, but the problem is, again, if you play Roadhog, I think he needs another support to exist. Because if you play Roadhog, I don't know what supports you play. Like, I don't know what supports you play with Roadhog to not have him be a throat. Are you going to sit your Roadhog on your support, or are you going to play Roadhog Lucio? That could work. What? Roadhog Lucio and then Mercy Sojourn? Maybe that could work, but then you're playing Lucio Mercy, and I don't think that'll be as bad in Overwatch 2 as it is in Overwatch 1, but I still don't think that's great. I don't think you can get, like, a lot of the things that I wanted to try ran into the, we need a, you know, we have a vulnerable flex support, and in Overwatch 2, it's an extremely vulnerable flex support because of weak Brig and no second tank. And I don't think you can justify a tank just sitting in your backline protecting your supports, unless it's maybe Sigma who's also doing damage. I don't think you can do that with Roadhog. Sigma is okay with, yes, I'm getting blocked. Yes, you're putting stuff in my way. Yes, you're doing stuff, but I'm wearing you down. Hog is more about that spike power, and he needs to basically flank to find openings to get that spike power value that is his hook. He's not going to want to just go, let me shield break you, let me shield break you, let me shield break you. 5v5 isn't D.Va competing more with Ball Winston than Sigma? She's never going to be picked for poke comps? Well, okay, I hear you. Yes, D.Va is competing more with Ball Winston. Totally agree. But if she's doing that, she doesn't win that competition. What she has going for her is she can eat things like sleep, which is nice. But if we've taken Flashbang off the table, she's eating Ana abilities. And that's kind of it. When it comes into the dive, she can eat Ana abilities, she can push out a soldier, push out a Hanzo. Don't get me wrong, those are good things. Don't have to worry about a flashbang as I understand it. It's okay. Like, it can help your team take staging to get a stronger dive, but she's not going to be as strong in the dive as any of her competition would be. Ball, Doomfist, or Winston, as far as I'm concerned. She was always much better at letting your Winston do a serious amount of work rather than doing a serious amount of work herself. So I don't think it's as good as your alternative options. I think she's going to feed too much too. Just nerf Tracer to the level of other heroes? Could be. I think the DPS that act tanky will be strong, like May, Reaper, Cassie. How are you going to get them in? Are you going to get them in behind an Orisa who has a movement speed buff during her thing? Oop, they're not going to keep up with her. Orisa can twirl her spear or twirl her javelin as she goes in and gets a movement speed buff and pushes people back, but like, I guess they can keep up. I guess DPS have a permanent movement speed buff in Overwatch 2. Maybe they can keep up, but I don't think I like the map designs for that. truth be told. Again, maybe the game feels slow because people can stage a Brawl rush similar to how they stage a dive, and maybe it feels slow because they're rotating from cover to cover to cover and then go, but I can pretty much promise that that's not the design element of let's rotate together behind a Reinhardt shield or behind a twirling Orisa spear. I can pretty much promise that's not the gameplay design that is trying to be encouraged for Overwatch 2, because that's too teamwork based. It's less teamwork based in dive, where you're sort of individually battling for your lanes, or it's less teamwork based in some ways in poke, where, hey, you're finding cute angles, finding timings to peek, that sort of thing. So I don't think they'll allow for a game that is, well, it's feeling slow right now because people are really, really setting up their Brawl rushes for like 20, 30 seconds and then going and winning the fight in 3-4 seconds. Like, that can work for dive. And that can work for Brawl in professional play and organized play. I don't think that is a latter thing. And I don't think that's what they're trying to balance towards or design towards. The problem is the game is going the wrong direction, but hey, whatever they already committed, so they will miss the rest of the tank player base. Maybe. Heard Zarya is currently the strongest tank. So you can look at that, and here's the thing. You might look at Zarya or you might look at Hog, and you might go, these are great tanks, but now show me your backline, is kind of my answer there. Like, you can look at that and go, hey, Zarya's fantastic. Zarya might be fantastic. I could see Zarya with the right DPS heroes being amazing. But now tell me what your backline is and how you keep it alive. I don't know how you do that with Zarya. Like, oh, well, you have bubbles for your backline. You probably need your bubbles for any sort of initiation of your own. Oh, well, you don't have to initiate. You can play the poke battle with them. Really? You want to play the poke battle with the opponents when you have Zarya? Zarya's range isn't amazing. Yes, she can right-click as far as she wants, but she's not amazing in a range game. So I think that might be one of those things where, like, Zarya feels good for the person playing Zarya, but does Zarya help their team win? Sojourn OP right now. Right. Sojourn is OP right now, and my predictions are based around that. And I don't expect that Sojourn will be super nerfed either. Can't believe you already made this vid. This is great. Why no Reddit post? I mean, it doesn't really fit for Overwatch University. This is meta prediction stuff, and that's the place that I can post lots and lots. Other places I run into more self-promotion stuff, so yeah. Temporal only reads one comment this whole time, and it's the one comment made by a woman. Blatant. I can't read that word on YouTube. They're not happy. Okay, Lark. Okay. The DPS have so much freedom. Tracer is destroying everything. I expect some degree of that being the case, yes. Especially because the community has been concerned about supports getting destroyed ever since 5v5 was announced, but the devs seem almost surprised. I don't know what to tell you. Okay. Kathiana being the best, her abilities are really good at setting up eliminations, and 5v5, one elimination is even more of a win than it already is. Right. In some ways, like, oh, there's more swing potential. In other ways, there's less, because, hey, one person being eliminated is a bigger percentage of your team gone, so it's harder to get back into a fight. On the other hand, if fights resolve really quickly, the easiest way to get back, or the easiest time to get back into a fight when you've gone down one or two, is before people's cooldowns have come back, before, people are able to recharge and get back to their full power. If you're in a situation where, hey, it's a 4v5, and the 4 have 50% of their resources left, and the 5 have 30% of the resources left, this 4 can absolutely still win right now. But as time goes on, they both get closer to 100% of their resources back, and 100% of 5 people's resources is a lot better than 4's, and now it's almost impossible for 4 to get back into it unless 5 majorly misplays here. So, yeah, if the game is resolving fast enough, you may feel like, hey, I can swing these fights back, I can do things. We'll have to see. I don't know how I feel about a pop-off or die world for supports. Is the mass removal of CC really necessary for 5v5? Maybe this is them throwing a bone to tanks. I mean, I'd say some of that is what this is. Hey, we're going to remove one of the tanks, but we're also going to give tanks a steadfast type thing where they resist CC and mostly go, hey, tanks get CC and not so much other people. So, like, they maybe thought, this is how we're going to hold on to our tanks. We're not going to have the stuff to protect the tanks as well, but we're going to, you know, because we won't have that second tank to help protect them, or whether that be Reinhardt helping his off-tank advance, be it Zarya or D.Va, by having a shield that they can help use for rotations, because Zarya does not walk through rotate particularly well, for example, or be that D.Va protecting Reinhardt when he goes in with DM, or Zarya protecting Reinhardt when he goes in. They had that back and forth of protecting each other. They won't have that, but they sort of went, hey, let's, you know, solve that, and maybe we can hold on to our tank player base, but it may be at the expense of supports. I am worried. I was perfectly fine with the base race style of play that you might have had in original dive, where you have your Zen or your Ana and they're getting dove by 3 or 4 people and your team is diving theirs, and whichever team set up the dive better, or whichever team's flex support is able to hold on longer to take longer to get eliminated so that their team can come back and help them, even if it's after they're dead, they still got ahead. I was okay with that playstyle, but damage in this game and healing in this game were both much lower when that was the way the game was played. Damage got cranked up massively to try to break goats back in the day because Brig came into this game. And it's been it's not as high as it once was, just like sustain isn't as high as it once was, but it's still tuned pretty highly, and in part you could say that is because that's been okay because Brig is in the game. You can break up dives on her backline, that sort of thing. And cover works against the high damage. Real cover works against the high damage of poke heroes. So it's sort of been okay that damage is high. You can't have it extremely, extremely high. It's not at the highest it's ever been, but that's been okay. But if we haven't brought down our damage, I think we could be in a world of hurt for supports, and it sounds like we are. I think Moira was hinted at getting a rework, which I totally believe will happen. Would not be remotely surprised. I think she's a bad hero if she can't cleave heal multiple tanks. I think she's already a bit of a bad hero, but I see very little reason that anything that got like rework status or new abilities wouldn't have made it into this leak document that we have. If there's actually multiple sources here, if Yiska actually got multiple sources, and I kind of believe that they do because enough of this got confirmed in the live stream that followed it, that I tend to believe this is accurate, we'd have seen all of the leaks. Now, I don't expect that we'd get, oh, well, you know, Tracer's bullet damage has been decreased by 5%, and fall-off range has been increased by 10%, and you know, Moira's healing numbers went down by 15 HPS, while Anna's went down by 10 per shot. And like, I don't expect all that to make it into this because, hey, that's just not real. That would take too much work, whatever, etc. From players who want to play the game and, you know, are basically throwing Yiska a bone here. But I do think actual ability real changes that aren't just number tunes, like someone got a new ability, someone lost an ability, someone got a rework, I do think those would have made it into here. So my belief is that they haven't happened yet on the alpha. Imagine Roadhog being the dive counter pick. I mean, he kind of is right now in some ways. Playing into Roadhog Sigma is super annoying as a ball dive team. Okay. You think Mercy was really weak in 5v5? It's going to be really hard to cover her reses. And without a res, I feel like you will just pick BAP and do damage yourself. So I think that's kind of true, Elark, but I sort of covered it already. I do think Mercy does the best job of any hero of creating a second bunker for you if you can't have a second tank. And that's why I sort of think about that one. And then if you have a hero that's particularly overtuned, like Sojourn sounds they are right now, Mercy has always been pretty good at, hey, I'm going to channel my value through a second hero, so it's sort of like getting to pick a second of that hero. It's not actually that good, but like Mercy, if you have a bad hero to channel through or a bad player to channel through, isn't going to get too much value. If you have a great hero or a great player to channel through, is. And that's sort of been the complaint about, oh, is Mercy getting boosted? Or, oh, can Mercy not climb herself? That sort of thing. But if you have an overtuned hero, or if you want to make a second bunker, she, I think, is going to be better for that than BAP. I also don't think you can put BAP in one bunker. Like, if you put BAP with Sojourn, where's your other support go? Is it Lucio and Lucio's diving in? Maybe that could work. Is it Moira and Moira's diving in? I don't think Moira's a good hero. Is it Bap in one bunker and Mercy in the other? I think Bap Mercy could be perfectly viable. I think you'd just be running Bap instead of Zen in that situation, like we already talked about, and that might make sense because Zen might still just be too frail because Sigma has a cooldown on barrier redeploys and is using their barrier to help them poke, and then a Sombra shows up and they can't redeploy their barrier in time to help Zen. So they try to stick their hand in Zen with shift or whatever, and maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. But Bap better survives that. We'll see. Really don't like the concept of invisibility plus good elimination power. I hear you, Semitic. It's a PvP staple, like snipers are a FPS staple, unfortunately. But I hear you. Run's probably going to be like he is now, only ran on maps that overwhelmingly favor Brawl. I think that's true. I think they know of the problems. Here's the thing. Like, because they know of the problems, because they've made clear to us that they know some things, like Ryan is too weak, and probably Winston, because they said main tanks were too weak. And again, I don't think they consider Brawl a main tank. I think this is something that they're thinking Ryan, Winston, and maybe even Orisa, even with the rework, whereas they said Diva and Zarya were stronger, though they said Doomfist was... They basically suggested that Doomfist was the best. So, like, if the devs are thinking that, we could see buffs to maybe these three heroes. If these three heroes get buffs, well, maybe that makes Winston actually a particularly good pick. If Winston, I don't know, if Winston gets something where... maybe he gets a smaller head hitbox. Maybe he gets a smaller cooldown on his barrier. Maybe he gets, maybe his cleave reach becomes longer. I don't know. You could do whatever you want to Winston, but there are things where you could tap numbers in such a way, or you could change his abilities in such a way that he becomes powerful enough to make more sense than heroes that we're predicting here. And that's fine. I mean, we can't know how they're going to patch things. We just have a hint of, oh, wait, they're probably going to go up with that. Or if we go over to damage, we might be in a situation where they knew Sombra was too good. Maybe they've already tuned her more appropriately, but even if they have, Tracer's probably a perfectly fine replacement, so I don't really care for what we're talking about here. And then they know that Sojourn is also great, but I'm not convinced that they'll nerf Sojourn all that hard because devs like to release their heroes as strong because it gets them played, and when it gets played, you get more data on it, on how to adjust it, as opposed to when you release it weak, no one plays it, and you don't actually know how to adjust it. We've seen that problem a few times in Overwatch. Okay. How does crossplay with Overwatch 1... How does crossplay with Overwatch 1 work on 5v5? Did they drop that promise? I think it's still fine. I think you can still have crossplay, but Overwatch 1 is only going to be played with 5v5. So you've lost me. You've lost me. I'm not understanding the question. Why wouldn't you be able to do crossplay on Overwatch 2? It seems like something they'd still incorporate, but maybe not. It's funny, I had a lot of people arguing with me about how much better the life of supports will be, and I'm just laughing at that, really. Not like they will enjoy the game anymore in Spawn. I mean... you might have DPS players playing supports who like it a little bit more because they're going, hey, this is a fighting style. It's less about healing our team. It's more about fighting flankers that come fight us. And Anna, Zen, Bap, they could all potentially do that. And that might be more enjoyable to that. For the people who are like, no, I'm a support, I want to heal, I want to enable other people, I want that to be my role, they probably won't enjoy it as much. Which I think is, the more interesting side of support. Don't get me wrong, I love destroying things as Zen. I love poking Winston's, Genji's, Cassidy's, etc. from halfway across the map as Anna and have them go, WTF, you're supposed to be healing. And me go, no, I don't have to heal if you're dead. But we'll see. We'll see. Okay. So like tanks now, but with better sustain and survival tools. If they don't remove SimTP at start of round, I'm going to tilt my face off. It's not the worst thing in the world. This alpha is going to be leakier than the Titanic at the end of the film Titanic. Do you mean the beta? I think the alpha, yeah, we did get some leaks on that, but I think what you're referring to is the balance of, oops, this isn't ready, this isn't close to production. But I think, the beta will be the better question when we get more people on it and can actually talk about it with more than theory crafting. But yeah, someone had a comment in here about they think Brawl DPS, shorter range DPS like May and Reaper are going to be really good. Again, I could see that if Zarya's really good, that could drag Reaper into the meta, or vice versa. I could see that, but I'm not convinced because I still don't think Brawl is going to be particularly strong. Overwatch 1 ceases to exist. Exactly. Ready to fight off flankers. There you go, Semitic. There you go. Works for me. Okay. I think that's going to do it. I don't really think we have more to cover here. Again, final thoughts. Look at this. I think we could either be looking at a poke dive thing, or we could be looking at a heavy poke thing. The heavy poke could still include a dive aspect, but I would lean more towards this one. I think this could be perfectly viable as well. We really have to know exactly how Sojourn works, and we don't. We're doing this from a lot of, hey, we have to make guesses based on the information we have, and I will be curious when, I'll just be curious when this goes live, how close this was, whatever. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I will continue to do Overwatch 2 coverage leading up to this game here, including some prediction stuff like this that is, hey, the best we can do. So if you want to see more like that, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, and please do drop a like on this video. But that's going to do it for now, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks. Temporal out.